Hi everyone, I hope you're having a nice day. So what I want to do is walk you through the Wallace Project Guidelines, which is our first assignment. And what you need to do is go into Project 1, click on the Wallace Project Guidelines, and the assignment guidelines will show up. And this is what it looks like. Basically, you'll want to read this, and ultimately you can even hit pause and just come back. Look at this question. What does his text tell us about our existence? So everything that we've been doing in class has led up to this point. So everything below this that says the grade for your text depends on how successfully it is how you're going to go about writing the assignment. So let's just walk through that to help you get started. And if you have any questions, you can email me or ask some of the other students in the class. So this is the overall question. What does his text tell us about our existence? But for the essay, you're doing a couple of things. You're answering this question: is David Foster Wallace persuasive? So that's one of the questions being asked. That's the main question being asked in the analysis part. So the bulk of the essay is going to be talking about how persuasive he is, but the overall question is what this says about our existence. So one thing you might want to do is hit pause on this video and just read through these guidelines so you get an understanding of the overall paper, and then you can come back and just re-hit play. So what I want you to do is start off with an interesting fact, statistic, story, experience, etc. Be super creative. So what I'm asking you to do is engage us in the first paragraph. Don't bore us. I know traditionally a lot of my students have said that they hate writing, they don't like writing, and one of the things is you just simply asked to regurgitate a lot of information. That's not what I'm asking you to do here. I'm asking you to come up with something really interesting. Kind of like if you were going to go on a first date with someone, if within the first 5 or 10 minutes the person is really boring, you're probably not going to want to go on a date with them again. So kind of look at it this way. You're trying to engage us and make it more personal and interest us in the rest of your paper. Then I want you to answer the question early in your text with a one-sentence focus statement. So what question are we answering? This one right here. Is David Foster Wallace persuasive? So you're doing this by doing three things. You're stating your purpose, you're stating the devices that he's using to persuade us, and then you're also stating what you think the author's purpose is. Now there's those three things, and you're like, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, let me run you through a quick example. So those are the three things being asked of you. So let me give you a sample sentence. So my purpose is something like David Foster Wallace not is persuasive, persuades the audience. So that's my purpose. What devices is he using? Well, if we go back to the guidelines, we'll see a little bit later on that you have to invent original communicator devices, define them, and discuss how they help or don't help to persuade. This is the analysis. So I'm creating my own devices. So the devices I'm going to use are the boomerang. That's the boomerang. And the Snow White. See, super creative names. You've never heard of these before. The devices can't be something that's already defined, like ethos or pathos or logos or hyperbole or anything that is a literary reference, like the feminist lens. So you want to use something creative that you come up with on your own. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. And then the author's purpose. What do I think the main purpose of his paper is? So I'm going to include that in this sentence. That's basically, I think he's trying to teach us to be more mindful. So that's all this has to be, as the guidelines say, in one sentence. Answers the question early in your text in a one sentence focus statement. So I have to combine all these three things, which is my purpose plus the devices plus what I think his purpose is, into one sentence. So I'm going to say something like, let me see here. Through the, see, writing's messy. Through the boomerang. I don't think that's how you spell boomerang. Yeah. And the Snow White devices, comma, David Foster Wallace persuades us to be more mindful. There's my one sentence focus sentence. So through these two devices, David Foster Wallace persuades us to be more mindful. And you're obviously not going to copy the structure of my sentence. I don't want to see mirror images of this, but I want to see something that does all three of these things in that one sentence focus sentence. So what I recommend is just writing it right now before you move on. Then you can look at the rest of the guidelines. And you can always just pause this and work on something before you come back. So the next guideline says, operates in a structured logical pattern that is easy to follow. So follows the structure stated in your focus sentence. So looking at our focus sentence, look at how I have these two devices, the boomerang and the Snow White. So if I'm writing my paper, I'm already starting to design like my intro. So my intro is going to have a hook where I'm going to engage, and then I'm going to have my focus sentence, which I just wrote. So then I'm going to have paragraph 2, which is say body paragraph 1. Say this is, I'm going to use my device, which is the boomerang. So now you see how I'm starting to set up my paper. So body paragraph 2, I'm going to use a different device, which is the Snow White. Cool. So you can see how there may be some other things. This is just my initial structure for the paper. There might be some other things we're going to add, but I have an intro. So say paragraph 1, say paragraph 2, say paragraph 3, and paragraph 4. I'm already designing my paper just sort of with the guidelines that I see. I don't know if this is how it's going to end up, so let's just work through it and we'll go from there. So operates in that structured logical pattern, so follows the structure. We just went over that a little bit. So analyzes the persuasiveness of the original text with limited summarizing. So this is really big. When we're looking at the structure of a paper, these paragraphs should not be summary, they should be analysis. So what's the difference between summary and analysis? Summary is basically saying what an author says. Analysis is saying how and why they say it. So your paper is about how and why, not about what he's saying. So the next guideline says, invents original communicative devices, defines them, and discusses how they help or don't help to persuade. So this is the analysis. And then if you look at the next guideline, it says uses specific examples, 2+ of the use of communicative devices to prove your text claims. So we have to use 2 examples within these 2 communicative devices. So we have 2 devices, the boomerang and Snow White, so we're going to have to use 2 examples. But the guidelines are saying to define them and discuss how they help or don't help. So what do I mean by a device, like this device that we're talking about? So what is the boomerang? So say the boomerang device is where an author, a device where an author repeats a message. So we see David Foster Wallace constantly repeat this water theme, or this default setting theme, or a number of themes that he talks about, or this monotony theme. So this is what he's doing, where an author repeats a message. And you want to talk about the purpose of the device as well. So to emphasize its importance. So when an author repeats a message, and this is why they're doing it, to emphasize the importance. So that's all the device is. So as the instructions say, I need to define the device, which I've done here. That'll be my first sentence. So the boomerang is a device where the author repeats a theme or a message to emphasize its importance. Then I'm going to give an example from the text. Example 1. So say a theme where he repeats himself is the water theme. And then I would explain how this helps Wallace be persuasive. So this is just a quick outline of the paper that I'm just sort of drafting up, and I'll give example 2, and I'll say like, oh, he always talks about the default setting. and then I would explain again how this helps Wallace be persuasive. This is kind of just repeat. Whoops. Why did I do that? I meant to copy this. Cool. Good. So that's what the guidelines are asking. I think I have this set up, and I think this paragraph is going to be the exact same thing, except instead of talking about the boomerang and using those examples, it's going to talk about the Snow White. So instead of using an example of water, I would use a different example, and instead of the default setting, I would use an example. So please don't use my examples. One thing you can do is you can use one of these devices. You can come up with this device, and you can use this device. You can copy my device, and then you can copy my definition and come up with one on your own, or you can just come up with two original ones. All right, looking at the guidelines, we've invented these devices, we've defined them, and we're discussing how they help or don't help. We've used two examples to prove my text claims. Now, effectively integrate two additional outside sources into your paper. So you've watched The Life of Pi, you've watched California by Delta Spirit, you've read Indian Education. You can use those two additional sources within the paper. I'm not telling you where to put those sources. Can you put them in the analysis? Sure. Can you put them in the intro as a hook or in your focus sentence? Absolutely. Can you put them in the conclusion? Absolutely. I'm not telling you where to put those outside sources. You can use those two sources from the ones we used in class, or you can come in with some other ones that you want. But the rule is you have to use at least one of the things we've used besides the Wallace piece. So you have to use one of those other three I talked about, and then you can come in with one outside as well. I just recommend using the ones we used in class, so you don't have to come up with one on your own. And integrate those sources however you want. And then here concludes with what this says about our existence in a tangible and specific way and a call to action. So this is kind of an interesting guideline because this tells you how to conclude the paper. So you're just saying what this says about what this says about our existence. So talk about, this is the overall question that was being asked, what this says about our existence as humans, and then give us a call to action, like do we need to be more mindful, do we need to be less selfish, and do it in a specific way. All right, so moving on with the guidelines, make sure each paragraph is related to the focus sentence with topic transition sentences. Something like, I'll give you an example right here. We want to transition ideas. So a sentence between this first body paragraph and this second body paragraph, I would say, not only does Wallace use the boomerang device to persuade us to be more mindful, but he also uses the Snow White. See how that transitions from that first body paragraph to the second one? So I want you to use those throughout in between each paragraph. And then make sure, I already read that one, use correct grammar, syntax, punctuation. Here's the big thing, be between 400 and 600 words. So you're writing this essay within 600 words. So I'm looking at what my design is. Looks about four paragraphs. Yours could be 5 or 6. That depends on what you want to do. That's up to you. But I've seen this done in 4 paragraphs. I've seen it done in 6 or 7. But make sure it's under 600 words. I don't see how it could be under 400 because there's a lot to do here. And then I like this last guideline, works. If your text works and works well, you can break any or all of the above rules. I recommend sticking to this, but if you think you've come up with a genius idea, go ahead and vary from any of the rules that were suggested in the guidelines. So basically that's it. These are the guidelines to the assignment. Get working. I'll send out instructions when this is due. We have a rough draft and then a final draft due. Have fun and send in any questions that you have.